Hi everyone. I hope you've been enjoying all the engaging sessions and discussions on day two of the Lit Fest. Ruth, it's such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much.
Ruth is an independent journalist and an author with over 2 decades of experience. She's written for several international and Indian publications. And Ruth, I'm so happy that we're going to be discussing your writing journey as well as your new book, India's Most Legendary Restaurants.
Thank you. Thank you.
So before we sort of get into the why, how, and what of the book, what I noticed was that you have a very interesting career trajectory. You moved from television to print and then to independent journalism. How did this transition come about, and how did this shape your approach towards writing and storytelling in general?
So I would say that my journey has been more of a transition that is led by circumstances. I've always wanted to be in television, and that's what I did in the first 4 years of my career. And then I had a baby, and and my baby is right here in front, no longer a baby. Had to make a change, come back into a different media stream, so to say. And when I joined a newspaper, I think I was lucky enough to have a really vast exposure in terms of features. The publication I worked with had different feature publications each day of the week. And so there was this amazing exposure to culture, to art, to food, entertainment, politics, automobiles, you name it, and I had it. And so by the time I went freelance, it was like I had the world at my feet in order to explore everything that was there. Writing about food honestly came in a very strange and organic manner. There was a point in my career where I was doing a lot of content development, and this was primarily for tech companies and IT companies. And I was teaching myself how to do SEO. And the only way I could do it was by starting a blog, which back then was a really, really big thing. And I taught myself that blog, and the blog happened to be about restaurants because my husband and I loved exploring restaurants. So I just started that blog. I learned SEO. The blog died a death long, long ago. But food writing continued. And so now a large part of my niche is about food writing for a lot of publications. And the book was a natural way, the next step for me.
You talked about restaurants and trying out and, of course, writing about them. So how did this particular book come about? In this book, you're taking the readers on this culinary journey across India, but through the lens of some of its historic eateries. Which is something that generally doesn't happen. How did this book come about? Was it a particular incident or an experience that led you, to writing this?
I think it's just plain good luck. So the book is based on what's called the Taste Atlas. The Taste Atlas releases a lot of lists every year. And last year they released a list on the 100 legendary restaurants of the world. 7 of India's restaurants made it to that list. And one of them is Paragon, which is in Kozhikode. I interviewed Sumesh, who is the current owner of Paragon, for the Mint Lounge. And I thoroughly enjoyed working on that story, telling their backstory, even though it was like a 1,000-word piece. That piece caught the attention of my publisher, Aleph Book Company, and they asked me whether I'd be interested in working with other writers to tell the stories of all the 7 restaurants that were there. So the idea behind the book was to look at these 7 restaurants from the perspectives of people who have lived in the city, perhaps gone to these legendary restaurants with their grandparents, parents, how they've seen these restaurants and their story evolve along with that. So when you read the book, you'll find something that you can connect with at every level, whether it's a personal story, whether it's the restaurant itself, an experience, and that's how we approach the book. So I love the entire approach and the work towards it.
I loved it too, and structure is something that I really like. So the way the book has been divided into 7 chapters, and how in each particular chapter you can, you can actually dig in from wherever you want. If you like a particular restaurant, or go in order. What I also noticed was that there are 2 stories that are written by you, and there are 4 other authors who actually come along. So you're both a contributing author as well as the editor of the book. It can be quite challenging because all of them have a very distinct writing style, and they have this unique perspective towards their city and towards the restaurant. So how did you sort of balance that and made sure that there was a cohesive voice and a cohesive tone?
That was actually quite a challenge because if you look at the book, I have one approach to the way I write my stories. I had to make like you said, the book had to be cohesive. Another challenge that we had, and not many people outside the publishing company know about it, was 2 of my writers. That's me and a co-writer. We both lost our fathers in the course of making this book. So we also had a very, what do you say, a creative challenge that also came in the middle of a deadline. But we powered through. That apart, it was about working with each of these writers to try and maintain their voice. So if I take the example of Om, who's based in Delhi and wrote the two essays on Kareem's and Amrik Sukhdev, when his first draft came to me, the first thing he said is, listen, I like Amrik Sukhdev more than I like the Kareem story. And when I read the stories, I like Kareem's more than I liked the Amrik Sukhdev story. And I practically made him rewrite the entire thing. And on the WhatsApp group that we had, he actually put a comment saying, like, we have a tyrant of an editor. And, but I still like the way the story came out, he said at the end of it. So I said, it's for the greater good of the book. What I've tried to do is, because these are also very personal stories, I've allowed it to flow that way. We've tried to all start with a very personal story at the beginning, flow into the history of the book, again weave in a personal story, and then come to a more generic conclusion about what it means for that city. So I think the story frame is there, and each one has their own voice, which is what I think gives the book a lot of character, because you see 5 different viewpoints on what is essentially what is legendary.
Right. I think this is something that actually comes through when you read the book. You realize that all of them, including you, have a long-standing equation, both with the restaurant and the city. So that love for that restaurant actually comes through. It's not just an article that's sort of written about the restaurant. The other thing that I loved was that it was not just a celebration of the restaurant, but it was also a tribute to the people behind it. I loved the sprinkling of personal anecdotes and the challenges that they faced. So is there any, I know that you've contributed and you've written 2 stories. One is of Paragon and the other is MTR. Anything that you want to sort of share? We don't want to give away a lot, of course, because please get her book. But any personal, or how it sort of, something new that you learned and it changed the way you thought about that particular restaurant.
Okay, in answer to that question, I'd love to just narrate the entire book or just sit and read the entire book out, because there's so many lovely stories that came out of the entire thing. One is of Peter Cat in Calcutta, and I really love the way Priyadarshini Chatterjee began the story. She actually began it by telling her audience that her love story, her first date with her husband was at Peter Cat, and she has a frame of the map leading to Peter Cat from her house with Peter Cat marked with a little heart. So I thought that was a lovely way of, beginning that story, because Peter Cat is at the heart of a lot of friendships, a lot of people who just meet out there for the sake of nostalgia. So that is one tiny little bit that I completely enjoyed. When Atish wrote about Ram Ashraya, it was the tiny things that he noticed which make a whole difference. For example, in Ram Ashraya, you have the pictures of different gods lining the entire walls.
Right.
And it came down to those tiny details of, how the flowers are replaced by afternoon because they turn dry. These are not things that you would notice in a legendary place because you're there for the food, you're in, you're out, you get the experience. But I think these are the tiny parts that mean a lot to people. And if those flowers are not replaced, people are going to notice because it has to be in their frame of mind. Sight.
I think, I completely enjoyed the personal anecdotes, and though there is a lot of historical research that's gone into it, what I also loved was that it was not overtly academic. So for a reader, it doesn't overwhelm you with a lot of historical facts, and there's a connection that you can sort of build. Like, for example, when I read your MTR story, I don't know, maybe you would want to share it, how your first visit to MTR happened.
So I've heard of MTR. I mean, I've been in Bangalore now for 22 years, and MTR was something my father spoke about when he was doing his engineering here at Avi University. He did not finish that engineering degree, but he regaled us with stories about this place called Revoli, which is on Double Road, and MTR, where he and his friends used to cycle every Sunday for a dosa. What happened was I was quite newly married, quite enthusiastic about learning my way through the kitchen. I couldn't cook to save my life at that point. Things have majorly changed. I hope my family is right here in front. What happened one day was my husband and I were planning to go for a movie. The name of the movie is Lakshya, the Hrithik Roshan's movie at that time. And I wanted to quickly finish cooking our lunch because it was a morning show. And I put rice in the pressure cooker and left it. What I thought I did was turn it off when I stepped out of the house. What I did was turn it on sim and stepped out of the house for the length of that movie, and then came back home, only to find that the pressure cooker, the rice of course was burnt beyond a crisp. the pressure cooker decided to burn along with it. So I had my entire house filled with this horrendous metallic smell. And I was completely beside myself. I truly wanted to cry, and I could cry very easily back then. So my husband said, "Listen, don't worry about it. We'll just go to MTR and we'll have a good lunch." And I sobbed my way all the way to MTR. But at the end of MTR's 15 dishes that come in such a rhythmic pattern, I was like, okay, it was worth burning that pressure cooker, to try MTR. So that was how MTR, my first experience of MTR. After that, we have been there millions of times.
So, what is it that makes us go there millions of times? What is it that makes restaurants legendary? Is it the history? Is it the lore? Is it the people behind it? What is it, or something completely unrelated?
I think after working on all of these stories, what I've realized is that people come back to this for the experience that they know is not going to change. Going to an MTR still, for me, is the same as what my dad described. I think even those chairs and tables are pretty much the same. The walls are same. The pictures are the same. And in any of these restaurants, you know what you're going to get, and that's what you're going for, and that's what makes it legendary. When in the F&B world, when everything is so transient and everything is changing so much, it's nice to have something that doesn't change, and this doesn't change. To me, that's what legendary is. It takes a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure it takes a lot. And what I noticed was that all of them have such humble beginnings, right? And they've, of course, faced many challenges, right from government regulations to change in locations to subordination to change in taste, like you said, because you expect the same taste. And like they say that, places that are sort of built on legacy, if there is a change of taste, that can be quite detrimental. So I completely agree. But do you think that now with changing taste and so many new places coming up, of course, there are a lot of places that are copying the legendary ones as well, whether it is in terms of the entire menu or stories for that matter. How challenging is it to remain legendary, to maintain that status? And how can they sort of, do that?
I don't think any of these legendary restaurants are actually trying to compete with anyone. Copycats, possibly they believe that the copycats are the best form of praise. But I don't see any of these restaurants actually needing to do anything other than be themselves in it. Like, even for example, when we were working with Anubhuti and I were working on the Tunde Kababi restaurant, 99% of that essay was her going to Lucknow at least 5 times to be able to try and get a smithereen of a story out of them, because they said, no, it's our food that speaks for us. How have you managed to maintain this recipe? It's a talent that God has given us. So it was just so hard to get that story out of them. They are so confident of the food that they have and the experience that they give. I don't think they see beyond that and the need to change in any way. That's their consistency.
Right, and also you said, it's so hard to get them to talk about it. I was reading that there's a certain spice mix. Of course, all of it can be exaggerated, like from 120 to 160 spices, and we're not going to give recipes. What also caught my attention was that they do not share recipes with the women of the house, because the women are going to get married and go into other families.
I think one of them does with the... I'm not sure if it's Amrik Sukhdev or it's Kareem's. One of them surprisingly did it through the women of the family. I'm not sure which one.
Right, I remember, but I think that is with their wives who have come into the family.
Come into the family, but not the women. Yes. Yeah.
I thought that was pretty interesting because, typically what happens is even with some relatives that you ask, they will definitely leave out one ingredient because it is this aunt's biryani and that one's flan. So that was interesting. I think we do have some time for questions, audience questions, but one more question that I want to ask you is, of course, this particular list was guided by a certain list that came out, and, we had these top 150 restaurants. If you were to sort of have, and no judgment and no pressure here, but if you had to say, talk about one or two of your favorite restaurants, maybe Bangalore-based or otherwise, what would maybe?
Ouch. That's a very, very difficult question to answer. But I think some of our family favorites, and which has never disappointed us and possibly could fit in the legendary status, we love breakfast at New Modern Hotel in VV Puram. It's called NMH. It's known better as NMH. So I think for us, that would be the place. Another place which we truly, truly loved and never disappointed us, unfortunately, which has shut down and which was in Jayanagar, was this tiny little place called Tandoori Nights, which the owner knew us so well that all we had to do was call up and say, Uncle, today I feel like something hot and gooey, and he knew exactly what to send, whether it was Indian or Chinese or whatever it is, he would send it to us. Unfortunately, that has closed down, but in my books, these would be legendary spaces. I do have a lot of others that I'd like to name, but I don't want to get into trouble in any way.
Yeah, I think it's this personal relation because when you keep going back to a particular restaurant and when you're guided by them or welcomed by them, that is what I guess makes them legendary or special. We have a little time now for audience questions. So if someone wants to share their thoughts or have any questions, please raise your hand and we'll. I don't see a microphone. We'll get a microphone to you.
Yeah, I wanted to ask like now with most of the people actually ordering food through Swiggy, Zomato, right? They're not actually going to a restaurant, but getting that food at home and enjoying it maybe with their family, watching a movie, and that's a different kind of experience. But the food remains the same. The taste pretty much remains the same. So how does the definition of legendary probably changes maybe 5 years down the line? Like how would people really think about a legendary restaurant or let's say legendary food per se?
So I just want to add on top of that. So if you open Swiggy or Zomato, right? Because of these offers, like 50% off, 40% off, most of the restaurants that you see on the top are like the famous ones, and they keep getting ratings. So how do you discover good food in such times? I mean, it's like really difficult to know which restaurant is offering good food because of the algorithms that we have on Swiggy and Zomato.
Okay, I'll split that question into the two questions that you have asked. So, how do restaurants continue to remain legendary if people are ordering in or but if you look at the lines at any of the restaurants, whether people are ordering in or not, the lines continue to remain the same. Try heading out in Bangalore. I'll talk about Bangalore or even Delhi or Bombay. Try heading out on a Friday night or Saturday night. Every restaurant, from the tiniest hole in the wall to the biggest, even the breweries here, which have like 1,500 capacity, people still go out. So I think that's not going to change for a while unless Bangalore's traffic gets even worse than what it is right now. So there's going to be, I think there's still more time for us to reach that question of what would happen to restaurants. With the way restaurants are opening now, possibly newer legendary restaurants may come in because there's always a space to bring in something new and try something new. And the generations are changing. A lot of these restaurants from the book as well, there are a lot of the youngster and the younger generation who are not ready to come in and take over the restaurants. So we never know whether these are going to continue or not. But a new legend is always in the making. So that, I guess, answers your question. How do you find food that is great? I think you have to step out more and don't depend on Swiggy and Zomato. Simple as that. And it would be as simple as step out of your house, walk, you see something that catches your eye, just go in and try it. Don't always be on the lookout for the next great meal. Be ready to experiment, find a crappy meal, and then the next best meal. I would say that, that would be my approach.
Any other questions or thoughts? There's.
So I'd like to ask what your thoughts on legendary restaurants becoming brands and franchises, as opposed to being contained to their location and city to lure people to come try it at its maybe seminal or origin space versus being accessible to everyone and becoming a legendary like outlet availability to the masses.
Okay, I think that comes down to two things. One is logistics and one is business. A lot of these legendary restaurants, like Kareem's, for example, they tried to go the franchisee way. It led to a lot of problems. They even had to get into a legal battle with someone who used the name and stuff like that. So for them, the question is, especially with these restaurants which are in the book, their whole idea is about maintaining their consistency. And a franchise model often doesn't allow them to do that as much as they'd like to take it to other cities. So it makes more sense for them to be in the city that they originated in. Having said that, Kareem's is also planning to open a lot of franchises, and that would be family-owned franchises. So there would still be someone from the family. For people who are not in a Delhi or in Calcutta or anywhere else, you'll have to travel to get it. So I think it's a matter of logistics and business. How much of business are you willing to let go of if you are sending your brand outside of your control? And how much are you willing to forego that? So I think it just depends on that.
Anyone else before we bring the session to an end? Okay. I have a personal question. I mean, not a personal question, but so you've deeply immersed in food and writing, and you enjoy reading as well. That's something I know. So are there any book recommendations? Because I know a lot of people here sitting here are actually avid readers, and they read a lot of food in Indian literature per se, and outside of, international literature as well. Any favorite books that you'd like to share? We are always looking for recommendations.
Oh, wow, that would be a really tough one. I think what I recently enjoyed reading was both of Abhijit Banerjee's books, because it was a very different take on how food, your relationship to food. So Cooking to Save Your Life and Chonk by Abhijit Banerjee, for sure. Priya Bala, who is from Bangalore, her recent book, Bazaar to Bites, and she has this lovely little recipe book that she brought out quite some time back. I can't really recall the name of the book right now, but I've bookmarked pretty much every recipe in that book, and they all work brilliantly well. So definitely that one. Where else would I go? Okay, yeah, memory is failing me right now, but these would be at the top of my mind. Yeah.
Thank you for those recommendations. In fact, Chonk, we attended the session today, and I think it seems pretty interesting. The intersection of food with economics just brings a different perspective. In any case, food is so much more than just sustenance.
Oh yes, and Mariam Reshi's book on spices.
Oh yes,
that is another lovely book to have.
That's a wonderful book. Yes, that's a good book. Thank you so much. It was lovely having you here, and thank you for sharing your writing journey and all these recommendations, and of course the story of India's most legendary restaurants. And I wish you good luck for future books and future writing. And thank you everybody for being such a wonderful audience. Enjoy the rest of the
Thank you,
evening.
Prachi. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.